Who were the Sea Peoples? What if everything you knew was swept away? Imagine a world of glittering palaces, mighty empires built over centuries, trade routes bustling with gold, tin, exotic goods. The powerful Hittites in Anatolia, the clever Mycenaeans in Greece, the rich merchant kings of Ugarit. They believed their world was eternal. They were wrong. A storm was gathering on the horizon, a human tsunami of unknown origin. They came from the sea, and they would bring with them an age of fire and ruin. These invaders were a mystery even to those who fought them. They were not a single army, not one kingdom with a recognizable king. The Egyptians described them as a confederation, a motley and terrifying alliance. They called them simply the peoples of the sea. They moved with their families, ox carts piled high with their worldly possessions, as if they were not just raiding but migrating. They were a whole people on the move, searching for a new home, and they were willing to burn the old world to the ground to find it. This was not just war, it was an apocalypse. Their origins were shrouded in the mists of the Mediterranean. Were they from the west, Sardinia, Sicily, or even further afield? Were they displaced peoples from the collapsing Mycenaean world of Greece, heroes and villains from the age of the Trojan War now cast adrift? The Egyptian inscriptions give us names: Sherden, Peliset, Cheka, Luka, Ekwesh. But in that moment, as their ships appeared like a dark stain on the blue sea, they were simply the face of the unknown, a nameless, relentless terror. Letters written on clay tablets, dug from the ashes of ruined cities, cry out with desperation. A king of Ugarit, a wealthy port city on the Syrian coast, wrote a frantic letter to his ally, pleading for help. "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came," he wrote. "My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." The late 13th and early 12th centuries BCE were a time of unprecedented crisis. We call it the Late Bronze Age collapse, a period when, in the space of a few generations, the great powers of the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East crumbled into dust. Mighty Hattusa, the capital of the formidable Hittite Empire, was violently destroyed and abandoned, never to be reoccupied. The Hittite kings, who once corresponded with pharaohs as equals, vanished from history. Their sprawling empire, which had stretched across modern-day Turkey, simply ceased to exist, its language and people lost to time. The destruction was so total that it was as if they had never been. Across the sea in Greece, the world of Agamemnon and Odysseus was also breathing its last. The great Mycenaean citadels, with their massive cyclopean walls, were burned and deserted. Palace at Pylos Palace, at Mycenae Palace at Tiryns. The intricate bureaucracy recorded on their linear bead tablets, which meticulously tracked every jar of olive oil and every fleece of wool, came to a sudden halt. The art of writing itself was lost in Greece for centuries. It was the beginning of a dark age, a period of poverty, depopulation and cultural isolation that would last for over 400 years. Further east, the rich trading hubs along the Levantine coast met a similar fate. The cosmopolitan city of Ugarit, a jewel on the Syrian coast, was put to the torch. The clay tablets discovered there, baked hard by the fires that destroyed the city, tell a story of growing panic and impending doom. They speak of famine, of enemy sightings, and of desperate, last-ditch military preparations. For a long time, historians pointed to a perfect storm of factors: prolonged drought, systemic economic failure, internal rebellions, disruptions to vital trade routes. Imagine a map of the Eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE. Trace your finger from west to east. The storm seems to have gathered in the central or western Mediterranean, Sicily, Sardinia. From there, they swept eastwards. Their first major target appears to have been the mighty Hittite Empire in Anatolia, what is now modern-day Turkey. Their ships would have landed on the southern coast, and their armies marched inland, leaving a trail of devastation. The Hittite heartland was their first great conquest. The grand capital, Hattusa, fell. The fortified cities of the Anatolian plateau were razed. From there, the wave of destruction split. One arm of the invasion seems to have moved overland, down through Syria, Imagine their ox carts lumbering through the smoldering ruins. They sacked Alalak. They burned Ugarit. They continued south, a relentless tide heading towards the rich lands of Egypt, the last great power still standing. Meanwhile, another arm of the invasion continued by sea. Their fleet, a formidable armada of ships filled with warriors, sailed along the Anatolian coast, raiding the island of Cyprus, Enkomi, Kition, leaving behind layers of ash and ruin for archaeologists to uncover millennia later. This combined land and sea assault was a brilliant, if brutal, strategy. The land forces cut off communication and trade routes. The naval forces ensured that no escape or reinforcement was possible by sea. They created a pincer movement on a civilizational scale, squeezing the life out of the ancient Near East. All that remained in their path was the kingdom of Egypt, ruled by the pharaoh Ramesses III. He knew they were coming. He had seen what they had done to his neighbors. The final confrontation was inevitable. Ramesses III knew the fate of the world rested on his shoulders. He had received desperate messages from his allies before they were silenced forever. No land could stand before their arms. The inscriptions at Medine Habu state listing the fallen kingdoms. Hatikode, Karkemish Arzawa, Alashia. The pharaoh watched as the Hittite Empire vanished and the Levant burned. He knew the Sea People's land forces were marching down the coast while their fleet was preparing to sail up the Nile Delta. Egypt was the final bastion. If Egypt fell, the light of civilization might be extinguished for good. Ramesses was a canny military strategist. He couldn't let the invaders make landfall and fight on home soil. The battle had to be won at the frontier. He organized a massive defense, fortified the coastline, mobilized his army, prepared his navy. He planned to trap the fleet in the winding, narrow channels of the Nile Delta, where their numbers would work against them, and Egypt's more agile ships could outmaneuver them. The Great Battle, c. 1177 BCE, was a masterful ambush. Sea People's ships sailed into the mouth of the Nile, and were met with a storm of arrows from Egyptian archers on the banks. Then Ramesses's navy struck. Egyptian ships with grappling hooks snagged enemy vessels, pulling them into brutal close-quarters combat. Medinet Habu reliefs show utter carnage. Overturned ships, warriors speared in the water, feathered headdresses floating in the blood-reddened water. On land, the pharaoh's army engaged the migrating horde from Syria. The fighting was fierce, but the disciplined, well-supplied Egyptian army prevailed. Ramesses III had won. He had saved Egypt. Victory inscriptions proclaim his triumph and the erasure of the invaders. Egypt survived, but it was Pyrrhic. The war exhausted the treasury and weakened the state. Egypt entered a long decline, never regaining former power. The Bronze Age was over, even for the victors. If you love uncovering the ancient world, subscribe for more evidence-based history and myth explored through stunning visuals. The theories. Ramesses III defeated the Sea Peoples, but he did not annihilate them. What happened to them after their great defeat? The waters of history grow murky here, and we are left with fascinating clues and competing theories. Ramesses claims to have settled the captive warriors and their families in his strongholds, incorporating them into Egyptian society as vassals or mercenaries. Perhaps some of the Sea Peoples were absorbed into the fabric of the Egyptian kingdom, their distinct identities slowly fading over generations. One compelling theory concerns the Peliset, the tribe with distinctive feathered headdresses. Many scholars link them to the Philistines. After their defeat, they settled the southern coastal plain of Canaan, a region later called Philistia. Archaeology supports this idea. In cities like Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, a new culture appears with Mycenaean-style pottery and different architectural styles. The Sheridan, with horned helmets, are intriguing. Some scholars link them to Sardinia, pointing to similar names and bronze figurines depicting warriors with horned helmets and round shields. Eerily like the Medinet Habu reliefs, could a contingent have settled in the western Mediterranean? The links are tantalizing, but proof remains elusive. They float just beyond our grasp. Other tribes may have vanished or been renamed. The Cheka may have settled at Dor. The Luka might connect to Lycia in Anatolia. The Ekwesh could reference the Achaeans, the Greeks of Homer's epics. Perhaps the Sea Peoples were not one cohesive group, but a shattered confederation scattered across the Mediterranean, assimilating into local populations and planting seeds of new cultures in the ashes of the old world. So we return to the central, haunting question: who were the Sea Peoples? Were they a coalition of pirates and raiders from the Western Mediterranean, driven by greed? Or were they refugees, the displaced victims of famine, drought, and the collapse of their own societies in Greece and Anatolia? Were they the cause of the Bronze Age collapse, or merely its most visible and violent symptom? The evidence is fragmented. The truth is, we still do not know for sure. They remain ancient history's greatest, most compelling enigma, a reminder of how fragile civilizations can be. What do you think happened to the Sea People?